Hello and welcome back to Deep Sleep Creep's YouTube channel. Today we're going to be listening to 3 more horror stories. If you enjoyed listening to it, please consider commenting and subscribing. So get comfortable and let's begin. I grew up in a rural part of Maryland, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone within 10 square miles, and it took 30 minutes to get to the nearest department store. Our house was positioned between a cornfield and a forest. The road leading to my house was about 6 miles long, and the only people who ever drove down it were the handful of people that lived back there, and the occasional archaeological van that would do digs in the plot next to our house when the farmers would turn the fields over. We had a few paranormal experiences in that house. I'll briefly mention a few of those before telling you the story. One day I was in my room upstairs playing piano, and I heard a loud bang on the wall outside my room. My parents said something like, "What the H was that?" And when I walked out of the room to ask them the same thing, my piano started playing the pre-installed demo songs completely unprompted. It freaked all of us out enough that we called my brother, who was in college at the time, to tell him about it. And years later he let us know that when we called him that night, he heard a deep laugh in the background of the phone call, and was too afraid to tell us about it at the time. Another odd occurrence was when I was sitting in the sunroom and watched my brother walking through the front yard toward the door. I turned and looked into the living room, only to see my actual brother sitting on the couch wearing a different shirt than the doppelganger that walked by the window. My parents would also hear me talking in the house pretty frequently when they knew I wasn't home. Anyways, in 8th grade I had this witch experience that I haven't been able to shake, and I had other people with me. My friend's dad was driving me home in his 3-seater truck with my friend sitting between us. We got to the stretch of road where we could see my house across the field. They planted soybeans that year so the corn wasn't blocking our view, and in the ditch right by the road was a figure I can only describe as a witch. We all saw her, we drove right past her. The ditch lining the road was about 2 feet deep and somewhat overgrown, and we could only see the upper half of her body, as if she was sitting cross-legged in the ditch. She was wearing an off-white nightgown that was stained brown, and her hair was black and tangled. She was looking up into the sky, with her arms extended toward the sky, and she was rocking in a circular motion. I know it sounds f***ing ridiculous, but all 3 of us were totally uncomfortable. My friend's dad was rough around the edges carpenter, no bullshit kind of guy. I remember really feeling scared when he asked us, "What the H was that?" She didn't look like a homeless person or a drug addict, and we were so far from any town we literally never had a single person in the 20 years I lived there wander into our area who didn't belong there. She looked like she came from another time period and was sitting in our ditch trying to summon a tornado. When we got home, my friend's dad walked us inside, which he didn't normally do because my parents didn't socialize with my friend's parents. He came in almost as if he wanted to kill time to not drive back by her again. He told my parents what we had seen, and we couldn't see her from our house, so we called the police just in case it was someone in need of psychiatric help. My friend and his dad left after a couple minutes, and the police came about 20 minutes later and said they didn't see anyone in the ditch and couldn't find anyone walking in the fields or roads in the surrounding area. My friend's dad called us once they got home and said that by the time they drove by the spot on their way home, she was gone. I truly cannot explain it. My friend's dad has since passed, but my friend says they still talked about it every now and then in the years following. For context, at the time I was 17 and living in Denver, I may have experienced a skinwalker encounter. Let me know what you think. It was during the summer and took place in my parents' cabin in rural Colorado, outside of Estes Park in a wooded area with the nearest people being 7 miles north. It was summer, and as a teenager that has nothing to do, my mum encouraged me to drive out to our underused cabin in rural Colorado. Before I left, my girlfriend texted that she wanted to come over to my house, so I invited her to the summer home. She planned to leave before night. The drive to Denver from the house is not short, but that night she would not be doing so. We brought 2 cars, her, a minivan, me, a Ram. We spent time walking outside or watching TV and such. By the time 6 p.m. rolled around, I decided to stay the night, and my girlfriend was going to leave in a few minutes, so I told her, "You can leave whenever, but right now I'm going to grab pillows from my truck." The cars had to be parked a quarter mile up from the house, so I began my walk, got to the car, grabbed my pillows, walked back, and saw my girlfriend absolutely distraught. She was walking for the door a minute after I left to catch up to me, when at the door she told me I heard a light scratch. Then apparently she heard in my voice, "Hey, open the door and let me in." Luckily, my girlfriend is very paranoid and decided to look through a window to see me walking down the road oblivious and nobody at the door. I'm confident that neither of us were under the influence and we were both sober. But that is only the first of 2 encounters. Both of us were freaked out by this, so we closed windows and doors and slept through the night completely fine. She left quickly at around 8 a.m. and I was left alone. I decided to stay because I was actually enjoying the freedom of being alone until it came to an end when I returned to the cabin. After entering, I crossed the large room to sit on the couch. When I kid you not, I hear my girlfriend at the door sounding distraught, saying, "Open the door, oh please, please open the door," accompanied with scraping sound on the concrete path. I called out and said, "What the hell is going on?" I heard a reply in my own voice, "Open the door, don't be a fool." I locked myself in the bathroom and called my dad to come over. I stayed in the bathroom until he got to the cabin and I told him everything. I don't know if he believed me, but the next day we left immediately. I had an encounter a couple of years ago where I was in the woods near a river when my machete disappeared. Moments later it appeared next to me, back in its sheath, as if from nowhere. So I went on a hike at this nature preserve, and when I reached the end, I was at this river. It was a peaceful spot, but not the most amazing spot I have ever seen. I went to leave back towards my car, and after about a quarter of a mile I heard what I thought was like a girl giggling. I assumed some people must have been coming down the river on a boat or something. When I looked over my shoulder, I noticed that my machete was gone, but the sheath was still firmly in my backpack. I figured I must have dropped it when I stopped, so I turned around and went back. I looked all over the place for it and no sign of my lost machete. I figured this place seemed like a good spot to set up a trail cam because there was a lily pond pretty close to the river where I thought wildlife would come to drink. As I walked to the side of the trail, the sheath of the machete suddenly falls to the ground, and I leave it there, grumbling under my breath that I must have lost the machete earlier on in the trail and just didn't notice. I removed my backpack and kneeled down to get the trail cam out when I think I heard someone giggle again, and I stood up with the camera and stop in my tracks, because as I go to turn around, I notice that my machete is back in its sheath, and is sitting right next to my pack. Now I had left the sheath on the ground several feet away when it fell out, and I had no idea where the machete itself was, and now it was suddenly back. I'm like 2 or 3 miles away from my car. I look around and see nothing and no one. I squat back down and start putting my camera away as I feel myself about to freak out and get a hold of myself somehow. Calmly put my backpack on, and then walk back over by the riverbank where it was wide open. I did not grab the machete. I left it where it was. I felt like there was no way a person had snuck up on me like that, and I never heard nor saw anything other than that weird giggling. I figured if something could do all of that without being noticed, then I definitely couldn't fight it. So I lit up a cigarette and then said, "Thank you for not taking my head off. I respect the forest, and I'm not here to mess anything up. I'm going to leave now." I then grabbed the machete and walked out of there, feeling like it would disappear again. I held it in my hand the whole way back. I still don't know what happened. Anyone have any idea what I encountered? I've tried to research but couldn't find anything that sounds like what I experienced.